just a teacher. Don't you want to be more than just a teacher? Because you have some really great ideas about what could help education, and you have a lot of success. And therefore, I really think you need to look at being more than just a teacher, maybe going to administration. I was told this not too long ago by a well-meaning individual in the system, and they didn't mean any harm, but when they told me to be more than just a teacher if I wanted to actually change anything, or because, having success meant that it was time to move on, it was painfully clear to me what one of the largest issues is in the American education system, or at least in South Carolina's public education system. And that is how little teacher voices are respected as professionals in knowing what's actually best for students in the classroom. And that's really sad to me because it's just common sense. This isn't like a radical statement to suggest that those who know what works best in the classroom are the individuals who actually work in the classroom, teachers, paraprofessionals, and the students themselves who are most affected by what happens in the classroom. But yet those individuals often have the least amount of voice in helping to shape decisions being made on behalf of the classroom. So it's almost like saying, man, you got some good ideas, but because you're just a teacher, I can't. But if you were an administrator, wow, I would really love to listen to more what you had to say. The problem is when you get away from the source material, you start to get disconnected from what is actually needed right now. And so many of our administrators have not been teachers since after COVID, and it is a major change since after COVID, which is also the correspondence, the explosion of so many apps and all that kind of stuff too. And many administrators haven't been in a classroom in a decade or more. And then, not surprisingly, many administrators have not taught at all in the subject or the area they're now in charge of giving advice on to their teachers. So this really creates a principal paradox where you haven't taught in an actual classroom in a long time. You're surrounded by other individuals all day who haven't taught in a long time. So you just simply start to lose connection with what actually is going on in the real classroom. You would think because of this paradox, though, that our system would welcome classroom perspective as very valuable insight from professionals called teachers who spend all day, every day with the students in the classroom. But it's almost just the opposite. If you have ideas and you're honest about what is working, what's not in your classroom, and you're very successful, you're often looked at as being a problem. In countries like Finland, and this is a wonderful book, by the way, countries like Finland, who have one of the best education systems in the world, they treat their teachers like professional and welcome teacher feedback on what's best in the classroom. They see teachers as assets who are outspoken, not as problems, or at least according to the book and the research I've done. Because the only way you're going to know what's going to help education most right now and stay up to date with your finger on the pulse is to actually be in the classroom, not just to drop by for a casual observation looking for an I can statement, but to really be a classroom teacher. In fact, in Finland, a lot of administrators continue to teach a course each semester just so they stay grounded in that. Now, what's very sad to me is when we have this just teacher mentality, what is education if it's not a teacher kind of coaching and helping and encouraging that student realize the wonder within themselves and to grow in that natural ways of curiosity and wonder? That is a real art form and a craft, and that is not something that can just be mandated through pacing guides or tested through a bunch of benchmark curriculum stuff with checkbox I can statements. That is something a professional dedicates a lifetime practice to, like medicine or law, to keep getting better at. That's where the real work, magic, and wonder happens, in the classroom. I don't really know if the system is aware of this contradicting message that it has, but if it wants to treat teachers as more than just teachers, it needs to start listening and welcoming and viewing teachers who are bold enough to speak up as assets, not as problems.
Together we learn, together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool, every teacher, every school.